What is happening?
Dear Luz Helena,
Ajá, dímelo.
microphone is off, so we're not listening on YouTube.
I don't know.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Excellent. My apologies. Okay, well, we'll start this one again then. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning in our first continuing professional development session of the week. We're having lots of sessions during our different academic periods, so I hope you've been able to join us for one or more. If you're not with us live today, hopefully you'll be able to watch the recording at some point and catch up on all of the interesting things that we're going to be talking about today. Today's session is regarding a very important aspect of education in all types of education, but particularly important in language teaching and learning, which is developing learner agency. And with us this morning is Mr. Philip Haynes, who is our speaker for today, who's going to be talking to us about developing learner agency. So thank you to the university for providing this space for us. I'm sorry that we couldn't have our face-to-face session as originally planned this morning, but obviously with our restrictions to do with the water rationing, we weren't able to have the face-to-face session as thought, but we are able to have the session online, which is amazing because it means that more people should be able to join us. So thank you to the university for that. Thank you to Oxford University Press for providing the space and obviously for supporting Philip in joining us this morning. And thank you in particular to our teacher, Luz Helena Carreño, who has helped to organise the session for us. So without further ado, I won't eat into the time that we have provided for Philip. So Philip, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. And I will let you get on with it and tell us all about everything we need to know about developing learner agency.
Thank you very much. I should just share my screen. Hope this works.
Excellent. We can see your screen now.
Yeah. Oops.
Presentation mode. We are
Thank
good.
you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you. So, teachers, it's very good to know that you're joining today. We're going to be talking about developing learner agency, and we have until just before 12 o'clock for this session. So, I want to let you know that the content of this session comes largely from a paper we published in Oxford University Press. It's completely free. You can access it via this QR code. I will show this to you again at the end if you wish to access this. This is one of about 11 papers we have available for you in this series on different topics. So if you don't have time to get that just now, you can get it later. I will also make my email address available to you at the end in case anybody wants this presentation. I'm very happy to share it with you. So let's get into the session. So the topic is learner agency, and this is the structure I have for you today. So what is learner agency, the benefits of learner agency, and the major part of the session will be practical steps for developing learner agency, and we will finish with conclusions. I don't have access to the chat. I will be asking you questions, but that's for you to reflect on during the session. But my colleagues, they will be collecting some questions, and we will have a space at the end if there are questions, and I can answer those. So please, please feel free to ask questions, but I won't be able to see what you're saying directly. So let's get started with the first part here. We have the topic learner agency, and the question is, what is learner agency? And this is for you to reflect on. I won't be able to see your answers. Which of these characteristics would you like your learners to have? So here are some characteristics. I've given them letters. Just reflect on this. Would you like your learners to have the feeling, to be feeling in control of their learning? Would you like them to be feeling that they can learn and improve? Would you like them to be taking initiative and creating opportunities to learn? Would you like them to be taking risks and being happy to learn from mistakes? And would you like them to be having the ability to adapt and persevere? If you said yes to any of these, you would like your students to have learner agency. This is not a definition of learner agency, but these are some of the characteristics that a learner with learner agency would have. And we can define learner agency, and this comes directly from the paper. Learner agency refers to the feeling of ownership and a sense of control that learners have over their learning. So it's about learners having control and ownership of their learning. And not all students have this. I don't know if you remember yourself when you were in primary and secondary school. I don't know if you had this feeling in every single class. I certainly didn't. There were times when I didn't feel I had any control. There were times when I don't think I had any ownership, but there were other classes when the teacher made the situation such that I did feel that I had control. And that's when I had more agency. And learner agency, I made this image trying to make it look like water. So learner agency is underneath. Learner agency is what supports other things. Some things that learner agency supports is the concept of learner autonomy. Learner autonomy requires students to have learner agency. And in your classes, you will have some students who have a degree of autonomy. You will have other students who are very reliant on the teacher. And it's better if students are able to take some control of their learning. Another thing that it supports is self-directed learning. Self-directed learning and learner autonomy are related things, but self-directed learning is when the learner not only has autonomy, but is able to decide what, when, how, and why they're going to be learning. And another concept is the concept of self-access and self-access centers. I don't know if this is a big thing in Colombia. It used to be a thing in different universities and polytechnics in Mexico, where I live. I'm not originally from Mexico, but I live in Mexico, and most large institutions would have some form of self-access center for students to go in, like a library, take different resources and use it for their own learning. This was a big thing in the 90s and the early 2000s. They don't seem to be as popular as they were before, and they often didn't work. There would be these resources like a mini library for language learning. It would be there and students would be encouraged to use it, and they often didn't. And one of the reasons would be that students didn't have enough agency. They didn't have enough control or ownership over their learning to be able to take advantage of these resources. A brilliant idea, but I think it failed often because the root of learner agency was not addressed. So we have this idea of learner agency, and in the paper that I mentioned earlier and will mention later, it breaks down this concept into 5 different areas, which I think personally for me as a teacher and teacher trainer, when things are broken down into different areas, it makes it easier for me to think about and for me to address these areas. So in the paper, we break down learner agency into 5 different areas, 5 different factors. We have cognitive factors. We have emotional factors. We have social and other behaviors. We have beliefs and attitudes. And we have awareness. And I'm going to be looking through all of these in the latter part of the session and giving you some ideas of actions you can take inside the classroom to develop learner agency in your students. So these are the 5 areas that learner agency has been broken down for you. And I'd like to use a quote from one of the authors of this paper. I don't know if you're familiar with Diana Larson Freeman, a huge thinker, at least from the 90s, if not before, a big thinker in English language teaching. She says, language teachers who promote learner agency recognize that they do not only teach language, they also teach learners. It's a very simple statement, but I think it's quite a sophisticated statement that we are language teachers. Our job is to help students develop language, but first and foremost, our students are learners. And if we address that first, address them as learners first and give them the tools to learn, it makes our life a lot easier. Good. So let's move on to the next part, the benefits of learner agency. If we believe that learner agency gives us benefits, then that is an incentive to put it into our classes. And I strongly believe that we can integrate something like learner agency into our classes without having to necessarily devote extra time that we don't have to this. We can integrate it into what we are already doing. And I think that many of you are already doing this, but maybe you don't have the term learner agency kind of fixed in your head already. So what are some of the benefits of learner agency? There are several. Learners can, the first one, if students have some learner agency, they can play a more active role in the classroom. If you take a regular classroom, you'll see that some students are more active and some students are less active. There are many reasons why a student would be active or less active. But if they don't have ownership or agency, then they don't necessarily know how to be active inside the classroom. And helping students develop learner agency can do this. A second one is that they can enjoy the process of learning. And it seems to be that students who do well when learning any subject tend to enjoy the process of learning. I certainly enjoyed the process of learning teacher training. It was probably the process I enjoyed more than the actual content. I think that's still true in my life. So if we can encourage students to enjoy the process, that's good. Click in the right place. Right. Another benefit is that learners can become more confident in their potential. I'm sure you have some students who think, oh, I can't learn English. Learning is too difficult. They don't believe they have the potential. And I think that's one of the roles of the teacher, to make students feel that they are capable of learning. Some students learn quicker than others. It's just a fact. But everybody has the potential to learn a language, or to learn English in this case. A fourth one here is that learners develop better language level, which I think it really is our main goal as English language teachers, or at least what the world believes we should be doing, is that students should develop a increasingly better level of language, but maybe we should not be focusing directly on them developing better language, but developing the environment and giving them the tools to do that. I was having a conversation, I was working with some teachers today, and one teacher said that language teaching is like an excuse, which I thought was a brilliant thing to say. Yes, our goal is to teach language, but it's an excuse for much bigger things, you know, to develop more rounded students. Controversial comment, but it made me excited to hear that. Right. And finally, and I think as a bigger picture and more exciting thing is that when we develop learner agency, learners can tackle problems they may experience in their lives. In schools around the world, in secondary school, students study a language, they study mathematics, they study their first language, they study literature, they study the sciences, geography, they do physical education. It's not because they need to learn those things, but through learning those subjects, it gives them the tools to tackle the problems of life. And I'd like you to reflect. I won't be able to see your answers, unfortunately, but at least you can go through the process. I've given you 5 different potential benefits, and I would like you to think for a minute, which of these benefits is the most important for you? There's no correct answer. I believe that these benefits are organized in an order. First of all, if students have an active role in the classroom, they will then be able to enjoy the process of learning, which will then help them become more confident in their potential, which will lead to a better level of language, which is the goal we are set by society as language teachers. But is it learning language which is the ultimate goal, or is it to prepare students to better tackle problems they may face in their lives? You may study physics when you're a teenager. You never need to study that again, but it's not studying physics that helps you, but it's what you learn that helps you do things later in your life. So I don't know what answer you have. I think they're all important, but I think they kind of go in a line. One thing leads to another. So there are many different benefits of learner agency. So this leads me to the main part of the session, which is thinking about, okay, what can we do as teachers to develop learner agency? If we know what learner agency is, if we know what benefits it can offer us and our students, we then need to put it inside the classroom. And as a teacher trainer, the thing that fascinates me most is, okay, what can the teacher do inside the classroom? Because a teacher in their role as a teacher is mostly spent in the classroom working directly with students. Yeah, the teacher has many different roles and many different things to do, but the job of the teacher, the real job of the teacher, is working there directly with the students. So we want to look at each of these different factors that we have already established, look at them individually, and think about what we as teachers can do in order to develop this. And there are many, 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 many different things we can do, but we're only going to look at a few because of time restrictions. So let's start first with cognitive factors. And as I said, there are many different things. For each of these, I'm only really going to look at a couple of main areas. And I've just chosen this one to begin with, which is we can teach language learning strategies. We can teach students to do things directly, but maybe if we give them the tools to be able to do it themselves, then they will be able to become more autonomous. And there are many, many different learning strategies. It's an area that fascinates me. I want to look at one in particular, which relates very strongly to my own learning difficulty, which is spelling. I have dyslexia. I have struggled every single day with spelling. So I'm fairly obsessed with being able to spell the word correctly when I need to, without having to constantly go to Google or go to a dictionary to look it up. Find a strategy that will help me remember the word. And I'm just going to show you 4 strategies. The first one relates to these 2 words. I don't know if these 2 words frustrate you. One is a noun and one is a verb. Some of you will have this organized inside your head perfectly. You will never struggle with it. And you might think, well, why is this difficult? But many people do get these 2 words confused. Which is a noun, which is a verb? And the way I helped myself remember was to sit down and look at it and try to work out a particular strategy to help me remember. And this is what I did. I realized that at the end of one of the words, we have the word ice. Ice is more common as a noun than it is as a verb. It does exist as a verb, but it's more commonly used as a noun. And I remember the word that has ice is a noun because ice is a noun, or more common as a noun. So to overcome my problem of not remembering which is which, I sat down, I applied a strategy, and now I have that strategy in my head, and now I can spell the word, or I can get the correct choice of word when I need it. And we can show students different strategies to overcome such problems. We can also show them some, we can get them to share some, and we can get to think that, yes, even though there are things that cause you problems, looking for a strategy can help you overcome that. I want to share a couple of, well, a few other visual ones. These things just fascinate me. This is something I learned as a much younger person. Parallel. Maybe you've realized, maybe you've never realized that there are 2 parallel lines in the middle of parallel. Is it spelt with 1 L in the middle or 2 L's in the middle? Well, it's spelt with parallel lines. The 2 L's become parallel. Also, if you're struggling with different parts of the word, you can use Spanish. And I'm a strong advocate of students using Spanish to help them remember the spelling of English words. And I make a sentence for myself. ¿Para quién es? No, es para él. No? And that is a way to put it in your head and not to forget. If students are struggling with, is it double L and double O in balloon? I never remember. When you draw a little picture, you make the strings, 2 strings for the letter O and 2 for the letter L. Oh, well, actually, there are not 4 of these, there are 5 of these. I did lie. I had, for most of my life, problems spelling the word visible. I used to spell it like this, and I thought that was how it was spelt. And I discovered a few years ago, it's not spelt like that, it's spelt like this. Huge frustration. What did I do? I turned the 2 dots of the I's into I's, and every time I need to spell the word visible, I have a vision of this. And I've shown this to many people, these spelling strategies, but my favorite spelling strategy, I know many people find these 2 words confusing, not the pronunciation, but the spelling. And I struggled with this, and my solution was the following. I turned the S's, I changed the way the S's looked, I changed the S in desert into a snake, and I imagine a snake going through the desert. I imagine specifically the deserts of Sonora in the north of Mexico, which I've had a chance to visit. And I turned the 2 S's of dessert into a cupcake, decoration on top of a cupcake. And that is my, what is my dessert? My dessert is a cupcake. So there are many different strategies, and most students have some strategies in their heads, but not all students are using these strategies effectively or consistently to help them overcome certain problems. And I've only looked at one particular area of language learning strategies, which is remembering how to spell. And I've used really only one area of that, which is using pictures within the words. So we've looked at a very specific area of teaching language learning strategies. I think it's a great idea if you as teachers can show strategies to your students, ask them what strategies they use, encourage them to use anything that helps them overcome a particular problem they have. And one strategy that I use is to use Spanish to help me remember how to spell English words, because Spanish is essentially a phonetic language, whereas English is not. And I know that many students do use the strategy of saying a word as if it were in Spanish, but they don't like to show that to the teacher because they feel that that is wrong. If it helps them overcome a particular problem and nobody is getting hurt in the process, physically or psychologically, then it's all good. I want to look at another one, another aspect of cognitive factors. One of them is that learners understand the importance of being free to make mistakes. So many students feel that that mistakes are wrong. Many students don't like making mistakes, but it's important that we discuss this with students, that we allow them to make mistakes. Pick any skill in life: knitting, mechanics, decorating, cooking, anything. You do not become good at it unless you go through a process where you do make mistakes and you realize, yes, that doesn't work. But it's only by being able to make mistakes that you are allowed to discover what is not right. So we need to make sure that students feel free to make mistakes. And I think this is a characteristic of a truly great teacher, that students feel so comfortable that if they get things wrong, there are no negative consequences of that. There are only positive consequences of making mistakes. And there are many things that we can do as teachers in order to encourage students to feel free to make mistakes. And that is how we address the question of error correction. Students will be producing language, they will be getting things wrong, and it's essential that they get things wrong. But we need to make sure that they feel comfortable to make mistakes. And in the class, we can take certain actions which will develop learner agency. And if you see at the bottom of the screen, it says learner agency, it says lower and higher. I want to show you 4 ways of working inside the classroom, which addresses the topic of error correction, which starts from a very low level of learner agency, moving up to a higher level of learner agency. Let me just adjust myself in my chair. There we go. So one thing that many teachers do, I saw this a lot with my kids when they were in primary school. The teacher would collect their notebooks and the teacher would make corrections. So the teacher corrects learners' mistakes in their notebooks. But that has a very, very low level of learner agency. In fact, there is almost no learner agency. A lot of students, what they do is they will say, oh, the teacher has corrected this. Great. Let me see if a little bit more light will be good. Possibly, yes. But really, the teacher is doing all the work. And what typically happens is that the students just ignore it. They don't really do anything with that information. So that activity is not developing learner agency to any extent. Another thing that we could do, which is a very simple action really, is the following. So the teacher makes deliberate mistakes when writing on the board, or writing on a digital board, or putting things in the chat, and asks the class to correct her. The teacher, again, similar to the first activity, is the instigator of everything, but the teacher is asking the students to think. The teacher is choosing what mistakes to look at. The teacher is asking the students to think about that. So the teacher is developing a slightly higher level of learner agency. In this case, the teacher is making the decision about what is going to be looked at, and is controlling the situation and asking the students when to look at particular mistakes. I know that some teachers will make mistakes on the board by mistake, or they will say that they're doing it by mistake or deliberately, even though it might be a mistake. But if the student is able to look at things and make corrections, that can be quite empowering for students. A favorite activity I have, and one that I wish all teachers would do because it is such a brilliant activity on a whole collection of different levels, and it addresses many different things, is this activity. The teacher collects incorrect sentences from learners writing or speaking, and the class and the whole class finds and corrects the mistakes. There are many ways of working with this, but if the teacher has assigned a piece of writing or a speaking activity, the teacher goes round and collects what I like to call the best worst, or the best most horrible mistakes. Collects maybe 8 or 10, not all of them, but the kind of the general mistakes that students are making, things that they should already know, or we believe they should already know how to correct, or should not be making those mistakes. The teacher then shares them on a screen or on a board and asks the students to correct the mistakes. The first time the teacher does this, the teacher will probably want to do it very teacher-fronted, being in control, asking the students one-on-one where the mistake is and what the mistake is and what the correct answer should be, but then getting the students to work in small groups. Okay, so here are 10 sentences that I collected from your writing. Each of them has a mistake. Work together in groups of 3. Can you find and correct the mistake? It's a brilliant activity. It really develops learner agency. The language is coming from the students, not the choice of the teacher, though the teacher is collecting the language. And then later, when students become very proficient with this kind of activity, one thing you can do is, again, collect some sentences, but of the 10 sentences, 8 are correct and 8 are incorrect and 2 are correct. So the students have to think even more, what is correct, what is not correct. And you can take it even one step further and say, some of these have mistakes, some of them don't. And I hope you're thinking, oh yes, this is a good activity because it does this, 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 and this. It gets students to think, it gets them to interact, it makes them aware of the kinds of mistakes they're making, and to put them in the front of their mind. It makes the students very active inside the classroom, and actually it's quite a fun activity. And some students will say things, oh yes, miss, that's my mistake. And other students who are a bit more timid, they can see, yes, that was my mistake, but they're not exposed to the whole class, which is quite a powerful thing. And the last one, which is probably the most difficult to do, requires a lot of skill from the teacher. The teacher gets learners to work together and do error correction on their own or their classmates' writing. But that kind of activity, beautiful as it is, will not work just if you do it. You have to set up and make sure students have a certain amount of learner agency, and feel free to question each other's work, to ask you for help, all of these different things. So my point here is we can develop learner agency through our regular practices, but some of our practices will be very kind of low on the scale of developing learner agency, and other ones will be much higher up on the scale of developing learner agency. I don't know what you think about those activities, but activity number 3 is something that I wish all teachers would do. It's a beautiful activity. Students generally like it. It drives your students forward and helps them develop a higher level of language, or accuracy in this case. So we've looked at one of these factors, one of the 5 factors of learner agency. The first one was cognitive factors. We're going to move on to emotional factors, which is incredibly important. How students feel about the class, the teacher, the subject, have a huge effect on their ability to learn and progress. The first one I have here is learners are resilient and not easily discouraged. Good learners in practically every subject are very resilient, and if they have setbacks, they can overcome those setbacks and continue. I wish I could see wish I had the chat here. Maybe this will come up later. I don't know if anybody has ever tried to learn the guitar. I've not ever really tried to learn the guitar because I don't have the resilience. I don't really have the full motivation, and I get discouraged quite easily. But anybody who has done something like learn the guitar, has a lot of resilience, motivation, and is not easily discouraged by setbacks. So that's one aspect. A second one is, and I'm going to ask you to reflect on this. I won't be able to see what you're thinking or to get your interaction, but an incredibly important thing, and I think perhaps the most important thing that any teacher can work on, is that the teacher creates an environment in which learners feel comfortable. Not so comfortable that they fall asleep, that's not the point, but they feel that they belong, that they are part of the classroom, they enjoy being inside the classroom. And if you can do this, the rest becomes much easier. And here is a question to reflect on. I won't be able to get your answers. They would, I'm sure you can come up with many things, and many of you will share similar ideas. What actions can teachers take to create this kind of environment? There are many, many, many things the teacher does. A lot about classroom management. Every single action the teacher takes, every single thing the teacher says will have an impact on this environment. A simple thing that I've seen again and again and again to help create this environment is starting a class with a general chat, not focused on the topic of the class, not looking at the topic of the book, but some kind of informal chat with the students, trying to get all the students to be involved, picking up on things they are saying. This is a very simple action that generally creates a very good feeling within the class, in the classroom for the rest of the progression of the classroom. Some students will speak more than others, but what I've seen happening when the teacher does this effectively, the students start to speak and start to participate more. And that it helps to develop that particular environment where students feel comfortable. How you correct errors is also incredibly important. Some students like to be corrected. Adults typically like to be corrected fairly quickly and openly. Just tell me I'm wrong, it's fine. Teenagers, that's more difficult. Going back to the third activity I was mentioning earlier, where you collect the sentences, you put them on the board, on the screen, students work together and correct the sentences, is a great way to correct errors without students being exposed. So all of these things, these little actions, these little activities, all go to help to make this environment where students feel comfortable. Right. How are we doing for time? I think we're okay. Yeah. And I would like to share with you a quote. This does not come from anybody connected to English language teaching. This comes from a British comedian who I heard on a podcast. This is Romesh Ranganathan, who before becoming a very, very famous British comedian, he was a mathematics teacher. And he was talking about there's a lot of parallels between what comedians do and what teachers do. It's one person standing in front of a big audience. It's what stand-up comedians do. And to some extent, that is what a teacher does. And he talks about this notion of how can we make students feel comfortable. He says, students have to feel you like them and you want them to do well. If you have that understanding, then they will accept anything from you. And I really like what he says in the first line in a bit. Students have to feel you like them. We don't have to like all of our students. It's very difficult to like all of our students, but students have to feel that you like them, or at least respect them, and that you have their best intentions in your mind. I think it's very true. If once you have that, students then will accept things from you, and the whole environment will then change. So, very wise words from an ex-mathematics teacher. So we've looked at two of these different aspects of learner agency. The next one is social and other behaviors, picking up on a different set of things here. Set goals and monitor progress towards meeting them. Good learners typically have clear goals in mind. Some students have no idea what a goal is or what their goals might be. But we can talk about goals. Some teachers write objectives of the class on the board, which I think is a good thing to do. But I think it's important that we actually discuss goals and help students monitor their progress. As I said, some teachers do write objectives for the class on the board, and it's good, but on its own, it doesn't go make reference to the goals, be asking students, have we already fulfilled this objective? And making reference back to them so the students become aware of what they could be doing and discuss the whole topic of setting goals. And another thing in this broad topic, the social and other behaviors, is that students ask questions when not sure. You see this again and again. You can divide a class in many different ways, but one way you can divide a class is into stronger students and less strong students in terms of learning and language learning. And students who ask questions, who are not afraid to ask questions when they're not sure, excuse me, is something that can really help develop learner agency. So a couple of questions to reflect on. And again, I can't see your answers, but I'd like you to reflect on this. Do your students like to ask questions when they're not sure? Why not? If students do not like to ask questions, maybe they don't feel completely comfortable inside the classroom. Maybe they fear what you will say. Maybe they feel they will be criticized for not having the correct language to ask the question. One thing you can do, so second question, what can we do to encourage students to ask questions, is to use the concept of exit tickets. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide that explains what exit tickets are, but the notion, an exit ticket has different names. You may be familiar with the idea, but with a different name. is where if you're in a face-to-face class, you ask students to, on a piece of paper, ask a question. It could be many different things, but one thing you can do is say, okay, are there any questions you would like to ask? Yeah, ask your questions, and they hand that to the teacher on a piece of paper. It can be anonymous, so they don't feel that they're going to be observed as being bad or silly by the teacher. The teacher then collects these and then can address these questions later. So the student is not exposed by the teacher, or the student doesn't feel, I'm always asking questions, I'm the only person who asks questions, and other students don't like that. You can ask students to write possible questions. And for me, it doesn't matter if it's written in English or Spanish, if it has a name or not. The student feels free to ask questions. You can also have a question box on your desk where they can write a question, and you encourage students to write questions. That way, students feel happy to ask questions, but without feeling exposed. One reason students sometimes don't feel very comfortable in the classroom is because they feel exposed. As somebody who struggled with reading and spelling, especially when I was younger, being asked to read aloud in the classroom was horrific. I hated those classes where the teacher wanted me to read aloud. It's not benefiting anybody, and it's making me feel bad. Don't do those kind of things. Don't put students into situations where they feel bad. They will hate your class, and they will kind of move away or want to distance themselves from the topic. Right. Good. Okay, good. My timing is okay. So I've got two other aspects to look at here. The next one is beliefs and attitudes. And a general question or a general topic here. Learners believe English is worthwhile. Some students like English. Great. Some students have a clear objective for learning English. Great. Some students don't see that it can benefit them in any particular way. Maybe that is something we can discuss with students, maybe make them aware of some things that it can benefit them with. One thing that learning English can do is help them understand their own language. For example, in Spanish, students have to learn all the names of the tenses, pluperfecto, and all of these different things. Learning another language can help them understand their own language, their own grammar, and help them be better in their first language. There are many, many reasons why English can be worthwhile, but if students don't believe it's worthwhile, it's not going to happen. So maybe we can, discuss or point them in the direction of these things. And learners who have learner agency, learners believe in their ability to learn. Again, maybe it's something we can discuss in the process of teaching, make students realize that, yes, they're very good at learning different things. Some students find language quite difficult to learn. I don't see as myself as a natural language learner. I've only ever really learnt one other language, English and Spanish, but that's because I've lived in Mexico for 29 years. And if I hadn't learnt anything by then, that would just be a disaster. But I'm not a particularly brilliant language learner, but I think I'm quite good at learning other things. And the last one here, awareness. A couple of things here. Learners can self-evaluate. This notion of self-evaluation and peer evaluation has been around in English language teaching in the textbooks for a good 10 years, if not a lot longer. And it is a brilliant thing to do, that students can evaluate their own progress. But not all students are immediately aware of how to do this. So the teacher can do this through making students aware of the process, aware of ways that students can do that, the benefits that it will give themselves, and maybe the teacher wants to look at other things that students, other activities that students have developed that particular skill. So students with learner agency, a high level of learner agency, can evaluate themselves. Yes, I'm strong at this, I'm weak at this. And the last one I'm going to look at in these 5 different areas of learner agency is that learners recognize learning opportunities when they occur. And a question, I won't be able to see your answers, but just to reflect, what kinds of learning opportunities exist for learners? And there are many, so many more than when I started teaching back in the mid-1990s. Teachers used to send students to the center of Mexico City, go to the center of Mexico City and interview a foreigner. That would be the only opportunity they could think of learning a language. But there are so many opportunities for learning that exist now. One very, very good thing that students can do, if they have a favorite series that they watch on TV, Netflix or whatever, if they watch the same thing, but in their second language, with or without the closed caption, that is a fantastic way to absorb lots of language and enjoy the process. So maybe we can discuss some of these processes. And some students are very aware of this and some are a little bit lost sometimes. Right. So we've looked at these 5 different areas of learner agency. I'm going to go to conclusions, and then there will be a little bit of space at the end in case there are some questions that have come through, and we can answer those. So conclusions. Again, we have this paper. It is available from this QR code. I'll show this to you again in a minute. And I can't actually get your conclusions right now. Maybe you can share those with me in a minute or two. I would love to know what some of your conclusions are. But I'll show you my conclusions, and then hopefully there'll be a chance, if any questions have come through, we can discuss those. So the first one here is that learner agency makes students more invested in their own learning. If you help students develop learner agency, they are more involved. They have more control over their own learning. Learner agency prepares learners for challenges in life. As English language teachers, we want students to learn and to be able to use English, but that's really almost just an excuse. You know, we're actually preparing students for the challenges of life through teaching them English. Learner agency can be developed through simple actions. I hope that the main part of the session that we just looked at were some suggestions of what you can do inside your classroom to develop learner agency are simple and relatively easy to implement actions. And the last one relates to teachers. And it is that teachers play a major role in developing learner agency. The actions that you take inside the classroom, especially for the students who don't have a high level of learner agency at the beginning, are crucial for students developing little by little more learner agency. So this leads me to the section. I've got one more slide, which essentially just says, thank you. I want to remind you that we have this paper on this topic, which is completely free. You have to register to be able to access it, but that's quite easy. It can be accessed via that URL or through that QR code. And I think we have now 11 other papers on different topics that might be of interest to you. But I hope at this moment we can go back. My colleagues, I wonder if you can join me, and I wonder if anybody has any questions that you can share with me. Are my colleagues going to come back? I hope so. Because this is the space I have designated for any questions, if there are any. Francisco's come back.
Philip.
Hi. Jill.
Hi, everybody. Luz has asked me to conduct the Q&A section, and I guess there are no comments on the YouTube channel. However, she said that there was a teacher that shared question internally and reads like this. I want to know if he has any strategy for control and some other change in pronunciation noun-verb pairs. I don't know if you
What was the first one?
get that
Strategies
part.
for
Control. I don't know if the teacher has the chance to
yeah, this is not what all teachers do. I use the word strategy for what the student does to help them learn, and I use technique for what the teacher does to manage the class. Maybe the teacher is asking about classroom management techniques. Though many people use them interchangeably, those terms. That's a big topic. I'm not sure if I can answer that one. What was the second question? I've avoided the question. What was the second question?
No, that was it.
But there was one about pronunciation.
Yeah, it says the second part of the question is some other change in pronunciation noun-verb pairs.
Oh, I mentioned the advice and advise. Yeah, which was a spelling for strategy, not for pronunciation. And spelling strategies and pronunciation strategies are quite separate. I think maybe she's talking about the record pairs, possibly. Which is it? Yeah, the noun tends to be stressed on the first syllable. The verb tends to be stressed on the second syllable. Make students aware of it. Come back to it several times. If you mention something just once, it generally doesn't stick in all students' heads. Are there any other questions?
Yes, some questions have come up in the YouTube channel. Do you have any strategy that helps you remember pronunciation with similar words? Which is similar what you just mentioned. Yes.
Yeah, I don't use that in English, but I use that in Spanish in my second language. I need to write it down. I need to see it. And I would sometimes spell it on my hand. I will write the word on my hand. I'm not sure if that exactly answers the question. Again, sorry for being very vague with my answers. But sometimes if you think about the idea of learning styles, it's pronunciation, which is auditory, but make it kinesthetic and visual as well is something that sometimes works for me. So don't just have it auditory, use the three learning styles or preferences together is a way that works sometimes. Do we have any time for another question?
We have 3 more questions, but however, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have time.
Well, it depends on Jill. When Jill decides that we need to wrap things up.
Maybe we have time for one last question. One question came in from the Programa Licenciatura en Lenguas Extranjeras SU. And it says, what other strategies can individuals employ to cultivate and enhance their learning agency, empowering them to take ownership of their own learning journey? It's quite a long question.
It is a long question. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and I broke it down into just strategies for remembering spelling and just with the visual aspect. If you go to the paper, it will give you some ideas of other strategies. There's also a fantastic book from the 1990s, learning to learn and learning strategies by Rebecca Oxford, which is brilliant for strategies. If you ever find the Rebecca Oxford book on learning strategies, that will give you the answer.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Philip, and thank you everybody for participating. Thank you for your questions. I'm sorry we don't have any more time now to go into any other questions and answers at the minute. But as Philip says, you can obviously have a look at the papers that he has recommended to you and now the book as well. So thank you so much for your time, Philip. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for
A pleasure.
wonderful insights. I'm sure everybody will find it really, really useful in their everyday teaching. I hope that you do. And thank you, Francisco, as well, for bringing Philip to us today. And enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.